it's not my fault. Very
No,
exciting.
it's not your
Okay.
fault. It's my fault.
Okay. So I mentioned that people can save a lot of time worrying if they're a terrible person if they watch this, and that they could find the key to their recovery, and that we have a lot of treatment and have learned by doing. And I mentioned, this is terrifying, and the only way through it is to face it. I know you made a post recently about like basically a lion coming in the room, and this is very similar to if a lion comes into a room, like it's better to face the lion and deal with it immediately as opposed to hide from it. And so you had mentioned the only way to beat fear is to go through it. And we're going to start with contamination OCD and the question one of our followers sent us. Do you want to give a quick background to the question? It was the mother who has contamination and morality fears.
Yeah, so there's two kids, one's older, one's younger, and one of them vapes. And so the question is, am I harming my child by having this older child sort of around and like touching the couch? Because a lot of contamination fears are like you touch something and then something else, um, gets contaminated. And that's pretty much true for everybody who has contamination fears. And it's like the question is, how do I deal with that? Without having to do all these compulsions because I can't wash his coat every time he comes in the house. And
Yeah,
I
it
think it's a
occurred to
really
me.
valid question, though, when you have contamination fears. It actually feels like the cross-contamination is real and you are actually going to get your children quite sick.
Well, on the one hand, the logic is flawless, and on the other hand, it's not true. So like it's a weird middle ground of, if poison touches one thing and then you touch the thing that touched the poison, like, and your immune system's weak. I mean, there is a certain amount of logic, but unfortunately, the last thing you want to do is what treatment is. And so in this case, it's, a teenage son exposed to tobacco in a situation where they can contaminate the house where there's an infant. Now, I know like this is a brutal treatment, and then it's
Yeah, because
am
the
I a
brutal
good?
thing is like, okay, so you have to expose your kid to tobacco because that's what your mind is telling you is happening.
It's like a double exposure. You have to expose your kid to expose you.
Yeah, yeah. Exposure with children is much harder, I believe. Like, I don't have kids, but I think it must be doubly hard.
And then this also, the root of this is, am I a good person? Like, am I a good mom if, I have to expose my child? Because she even said, like, at some level, I can't wash the couch and the jacket and the clothes, like, every time my kid comes home.
Yeah, but some people with OCD would, right? So if people have levels of the compulsions they're comfortable doing anyways, but I think the response prevention here is, I mean, it's do nothing. It's not wash the coat, but I think that I was telling you it's important to create a hierarchy. And so if you can't just go cold turkey and do nothing, maybe wash the coat once a week or once every, 2 times a week and reduce it from there because the anxiety is often so high that you can't just stop your compulsions altogether. And that goes for every single theme. And then
Oh,
the
yeah.
question, oh,
Sorry to cut you off. Akar, yeah, go ahead, type up your question and we'll mention it. Go ahead, Marco.
yeah, and then so, but often people don't realize is there's a second layer to that where am I a bad mom? Am I a bad person?
Yeah,
And
she feels so irresponsible.
yeah, and everybody with OCD feels irresponsible. That's also a common theme for me too, and I don't even have contamination. And the answer to that is Albert Ellis, is the founder of CBT, who says, look, we are all human beings doing bad and good things, and it's really subjective. And we tend to overgeneralize in society and just say, okay, you did this bad thing, so you're bad now. And that's not a rational belief. So it's getting under those irrational beliefs and creating more rational understanding of ourselves and others.
So she actually asked, are there success stories of this? And it hit me about this is very similar to the morality. Like if I drive by and I think I hit someone, the moral thing is to get out and check. So she's like, well, are there
Absolutely.
success stories like this about people getting over fears that they think are actually harmful? Why would I do something that I think is harmful? Can you speak to that? Like, I think you had that
I
exact.
I have, well, I have had driving. I don't have it anymore. And it's because my thought process has changed. So I basically did cold turkey and I just stopped those compulsions. I stopped getting out of the car. And at first, it's kind of weird because at first you're really afraid, but once you've done it for the 100th time, your brain just doesn't see it as a bad thing anymore. And that's why a lot of this treatment is behavioral. It's, yeah, you can tout those rational beliefs all day, but if you don't act and show your brain that it's safe, it's going to continue telling you that you're a bad person, right? So
Yeah,
there's
so this,
really two sides to this.
well, I mean, it's just like the lion metaphor. Like, yeah, it's scary, but if you don't confront it, like if you don't walk towards it, it gets worse. Like you start to cower away from it as if it was scarier.
Your brain
Um,
starts to see it as a signal that this is a bad and scary thing, the more you do a compulsion or you avoid. So you have to teach your brain that it's not bad and scary. And then your brain goes, oh, okay, I'm a back off.
so we've got a question, and we can address it quickly. This is exactly what we're speaking about. The question is, I am suffering from intrusive images towards close relations, and it is because of watching explicit content. And I think you're onto something there. I think if you're watching explicit content, then you're fueling um, your intrusive, like your brain will have that imagery kind of to use as a weapon against you. So obviously, you want to minimize as much content that's going to haunt you later on. But this is a classic intrusive thought. In this case, it's towards close
Well,
relations.
you want to be careful. You don't want to avoid things. Like, you don't want to avoid a movie just because there might be explicit content in it if you want to see the movie, for example.
True.
So it's
But
a tricky balance.
what we can talk about this in labeling as well, because you have to label, you almost have to choose your exposure. You're right. You should, I mean, do what you want to do. But if it's a negative thing, no. I mean, this comes up as taboo obsessions. I'd say this is a taboo obsession. It's
It's
some,
absolutely a taboo obsession because you're looking at this content and you're saying, what does this say about me? So people with OCD, we always think our thoughts are really meaningful and what we do is really meaningful when actually it means nothing, right?
Brainlock's really good about that. He says devalue it, like see the intrusive thought, like ruminating about it as garbage, as like a negative habit, something to be thrown out, like stinky garbage. Um, so anyway, so that's the comment. And just to finish off on the mother who had that son, you know, basically you have to figure out what's acceptable. I mean, I have a thing where after I go to the bathroom, I wash my hands once and I'm done. You know, like I just to clamp down on hand washing. When it comes to washing, let's say the couch or the clothes, it's. I guess you were right. It's do the hierarchy. Whenever it is, don't do more than it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I set a lot of rules for myself when I sense compulsion starting to mount. So, yeah, it's really key to have rules and to stick to them. And if you find that it's too hard, you can say, okay, like let's say washing the coat 3 times, or sorry, once per week is too hard, then do it 2 times and then have a plan that in a week you'll reassess. And I think that's really important to like slowly getting your anxiety down versus just going cold turkey. So, and then create the rules while you're calm because when you're stressed, of course, you think the rule is pointless and
Oh yeah, you just override it because like you're on this train of I mean I've how could I stop doing compulsions? I just did it 5 times. And her last comment was, I don't know if there's such a thing as ERP when your fear is actually harmful. It's like they all feel actually harmful and you don't know. That's part of the uncertainty is you don't know how harmful it may or may not be because some
pe
things is just
people without OCD are going around harming people. For example, a nurse could have COVID, not realize it, and go do her rounds all day. But people do it, they just don't think about it. So we're just very aware of the risks. What we have to realize is that we're all human and we can't sort of put ourselves from higher standards to other people, which is what we do all day long,
yeah, yeah. Like, I
right?
mean, that feeling of just terror and like, this is actually like the biggest deal ever. It shows you're going in the right direction, unless you're running away from it. And you mentioned kind of the nurse. Do you want to talk about the health OCD aspect of, obsessing about whether or not you have cancer and looking for symptoms and wondering and getting them checked.
Yeah, so one of my big fears for it goes on and off for the past few years is whether I have breast cancer. And I know that a lot of people with OCD are worried about if they have a brain tumor or they have AIDS. Those are the biggest ones that I've heard of. And basically, it's with health OCD, it's always the same though. It's that we want to go to the doctor, and people with OCD go to the doctor a lot, and we ask about like various things in our bodies because we want to make sure it's almost like we want a body scan to show that we're safe. And I mean, that's our disorder, right? Is we want to feel safe and we don't because we feel like something bad's going to happen. And with health, it's really scary because we feel like if we don't act right now, the cancer is going to spread. That was my fear, is that I would be irresponsible. The cancer would spread because breast cancer is treatable if it's early stages. So I kept thinking, I'm such a bad person because I'm not going to the doctor, I'm not seeking treatment, I'm dying. But of course, I knew that I have this disorder, and so my brain has a tendency to like catastrophize. So I had to really every day say to myself, yeah, you might have breast cancer, but every time you try to check, you're telling your brain that there's certainty in this. And one of the ways that I got around it was I thought, even if I go to the doctor and I get a mammogram, I could get breast cancer in a month, and then I'd have to go again. And so there's really no certainty, or the doctor could miss something, right? So there are all these other variables, and doctors are not certain, they're not superhuman, right? So doctors make mistakes too. So that
You
was
have,
kind of how I talked myself out of that one.
you have some of the funniest scripts to like mentally say when you catch yourself obsessing. I just remember when I remember calling you the relationship OCD Yoda because a fear would come up about your relationship and you go like he's just cheating, like do you
That's
is
what
there
exactly, that's what I got to, honestly. I was sitting there with you and I was like, yeah, he's cheating right now, maybe, right? Because or else you're going to spend your whole night obsessing about whether he's cheating.
I mean, I guess. I mean, I had never gotten to that level, so going from 0 to 100 was really funny for me because it's same thing with breast cancer. Right there, I went, oh, you really went down the rabbit hole. I didn't know that you'd be a bad person if you didn't get checked early and stop it early because you can be treated easily early and you'd be surrounded by
Well,
family being like, if you were a good person, you'd still
well,
be
not a good
alive.
person. I'm very worried about being irresponsible, but I guess it's linked. Those two things are very closely linked.
Yeah, it's exactly what the person wrote in and said as well. Why don't we switch to taboo obsessions? We mentioned it earlier with the comment. Now, these are usually, I guess they're mostly sexual or violent. What do you think?
So taboo obsessions play into shame, which is a huge, I think everybody with OCD experiences a lot of shame.
Oh yeah.
And society has told us that certain sexual content and certain topics should be surrounded with shame and shouldn't be talked about. And so our brain latches to that and says, okay, this is bad. Let's not think about this. And so as soon as you say, don't think about this, your brain's going to give you more information like that. I actually read that feelings of disgust can trigger
Hmm.
obsessing because you think, ew, this is so awful. Don't think, don't think, don't think. And then you're flooded
Well,
with those
what?
thoughts.
Why don't we tie this into labeling? How would you label
Sure.
taboo obsessions in a way to treat it? Because it's the next topic, and people normally, a violent obsession or an intrusive thought or a sexual intrusive thought comes up. We feel it so strongly because like it just bothers us that much. Where's the fine line with labeling it?
Okay, so labeling can be good or bad because people can quickly turn labeling into reassurance. So you have to be careful to not say, this is OCD, it doesn't matter, because you'll come up with what if this isn't OCD, right? So
Well,
what Jake says always is, if it feels like OCD, treat it like OCD, which means that you leave open the possibility. Okay, so the fear is that I'm a bad person because I want to hurt somebody, or I want to do this sexually inappropriate thing because my brain has given me this intrusive thought that I have no control over. You can say maybe I will, but right now I'm not. And also, I have control over my actions, and people with OCD don't realize that just because you think something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do it. And that's, I mean, I know we're not supposed to give certainty, but you do have control over.
Well, if what you have is OCD and you don't have something else that may be comorbid,
Right.
then and then also if you have a back history, I remember talking when I was having treatment, and my therapist was like, "Have you done any of these intrusive thoughts that you're worried about?" And I was like, "No." And she's
No.
like, "Have you thought about that?"
We think that thinking something makes us believe in it, which
Yeah, I mean, well, it's just it's so scary. I think that might be the first thing for labeling is like if you feel terror, you
I
know.
always know a compulsion is coming on because I get this feeling in my gut of like pure terror. And then I feel like I immediately have to act on it. And as soon as I feel like immediate urge, I stop and I just say, okay, breathe. We're
So
not going
actually,
to do this right now.
our topics 2, 3, and 4 are really and 5. They're all really tied in. You've got taboo obsessions. You've got how to label. You've got reassurance, and you've got how to accept uncertainty. So you've got the taboo obsessions stick because they're so scary, and then you want to wrestle with it like with certainty. It's like, do I really feel this urge?
Am I a bad person for having this thought,
Yeah.
right?
And then it's labeling, okay, well, this is under this umbrella, whether it's,
Well, I think it's important to say this is an intrusive thought. Everyone has intrusive thoughts, and that's a really good label to put onto that thought.
and then you got to be careful about reassurance. And
Yeah.
then that ties into uncertainty, where you can definitely say this is one of the major uh, topics or concerns within OCD.
Okay, maybe we should speak a bit to reassurance though, just so everybody knows what reassurance is. There's two sides to it. So there's one where, let's say I have a violent thought, and then I go to my mom and I say, do you think that I would act on this? Do you think I would actually hurt this person? That's reassurance. And well, then the mom will say, no, no, you're a good person. It's fine. That's reassurance. There's also reassurance in your mind where you think, oh my gosh, would I do that? No, no, I would never do that. But then a few minutes later, you think, but would I? Or what if, right? And then you say, no, no, it's fine. So those are two types of reassurance, external and internal. The problem with that is that it's never enough. It's going to fuel your OCD like nobody's business.
Well, reassurance, it's like, it's hard to even notice. Like, I think, so we said, do you want to discover the key to your recovery? I would say knowing that you're kind of, you have an obsession and that you're engaging in your compulsions, being aware of that, knowing what the uncertainty is, what what you're wrestling with for reassurance is, and then knowing you have to kind of accept that your worst fears might be true, or this just might be a passing thought that you're wasting time over. Do you think that's about right?
Yeah, there's a difference between reflection and rumination, right? Reflection, you're curious, you're sort of thinking about it, but rumination is driven by fear. And as soon as you're engaging in that, there's self-reassurance is basically baked into that, and that's real bad for
Well, this is how
recovery.
you can save so much time and energy. Is the difference between rumination and reflection is just that terror. So you're wasting a ton of energy and time, going over the specifics of what you're trying to get to the root of, whether it's, do I have breast cancer? Would I be irresponsible? Is my teenager contaminated with tobacco? Will that make my toddler sick? Will that make me a bad mother? How many times do I have to wash them? Like all of this will save you an enormous amount of time. And the key is noticing the difference between the obsessions, the compulsions,
Well, it's
and
even simpler than that. It's just being comfortable not answering all of those questions that you just listed, right? So
yeah,
the
if you don't
questions
even
can be
start.
there. Well, we're gonna have questions because we're human beings with brains, but most people don't try to find an answer. They'll think, "Oh, that was a weird thought. Oh, okay," and then they move on, right? Or whereas someone with OCD will say, "What does this mean about me?"
Well,
And
it's almost
then,
like being able to let it go.
well,
Would you
that's the
say?
thing with the example, our OCD is he cheating on me? Well, that doesn't require an answer,
Yeah,
right?
it's just a thought of like, well, that would be bad.
That would not be fun, but okay.
And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if relationship OCD would be a taboo obsession, but there's a similar aspect to treating all of it, you know?
I think there's a lot of shame associated with relationship OCD. Um, so I think it could be linked in, Well, there's shame with most obsessions.
Absolutely. And then, when you go to the next level, as soon as shame doesn't have as big a hold over you, because a lot of this is done in the dark and like you want to hide your compulsions. You don't want to see
Well,
people
that's why,
check.
so you can tell the difference in support group. Some people show up when they're new to treatment, they won't show their faces, whereas people who've been in treatment for several years will. And it's because as you go through recovery, shame is lifted. Like I think I felt 50% of my shame lifted in my first therapy session when I told them what happened, and they told me that they looked at me like, okay. And I couldn't believe that it was just normal.
Well,
He's like,
it's
yeah,
nice.
people with OCD do that, and everybody else in my life didn't do this, and so it was wild.
Yeah, the community aspect and seeing other people have kind of going through, what you've gone through is big because it was more of a minority concern before. Now, contamination OCD is pretty strong in the kind of public consciousness. Hand sanitizer is now a big deal. When I was using it before, it was a big deal, and I had to like hide it. And so some aspects of OCD are more um, it's not as shameful. In fact, there's maybe more reassurance. If I didn't have that treated, I might have doubled down and thought, hey, it's normal. It might be harder to do contamination OCD in a way now. Um, in any case, maybe we should talk about mental reassurance before we wrap. How would you say this? This might be a harder one for people to pick up on.
Of mental reassurance?
Mental reassurance. So like it's physical reassurance. It's easier for other people to see and people to notice themselves, 10 times closing a tap. It's harder for people to see rumination where they're thinking through like a number of things to get reassurance. Like where
Yeah.
you can say, I didn't hit someone because,
Well,
whatever.
mental reassurance is nothing more than trying to find certainty. So as soon as you're overthinking on a topic and trying to find an answer, when there's no new information, and that's key, because I'll just think about a topic, but with no new information, you're like a cow chewing cud. It's just like, because
I
that's what
didn't think of
rumination
that.
is.
The no new information rule is a good rule because it's easy to get hard on yourself if there's a new piece of information and you're going through it. That's a different thing, but that's great. And then basically that gets back to how do you accept uncertainty? And I think usually my thing is if it feels terrible and I'm not doing a compulsion, then that's me accepting uncertainty. Do you have a similar experience?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, not doing your compulsion is, so that's the thing. You have to not do your compulsion, but then accept uncertainty. So if you don't check that you turn the stove off, but then you spend the rest of the day rechecking in your mind whether the knob was off or not, that's not really doing the response prevention properly.
Or
So,
if you have a picture that you took and then you're looking at the picture, that's
yeah, which is what I used to do as well.
That's really widespread. A lot of people do that, and I never did it. I would just go extra hard on mental reassurance and more. I did some picture stuff, but not with the stove, at least. Okay, should we mention? Is there anything else on your end you think we should mention before we wrap with telling them? I mean, this like one of the main questions from the woman who wrote in was, you know, are there success stories? Like, does this work when it feels terrifying? I can say yes. You're more active now in the support group. How many? You see a lot of people probably having success, I imagine.
Oh yeah, we see the treatment works for sure. Like it's weird because it's a gradual process, right? So it's not like somebody comes in 1 week and then the next week they're healed and it's all better, but over the, over the course of months, you can see people like one volunteer, like Matt, he's made so much progress, and you can tell because he before he would get really caught up in it, and now he just says, okay. yeah, this is OCD. Okay. Right? When you're in the middle of it, it really feels like it's real. But as you recover, you start to calm down and you can rationalize when something is OCD and when it's just a real problem. I know, which is kind of reassurance, but you can kind of see, like, I can see my mind like explosions now. Like for example, like I just got a condo and then I smelled a funny smell, and then my mind said, "Your whole condo has mold, and you just dumped like all this
Oh, you
money
have a
into
mold
this."
experience now? That's hysterical. I was obsessed with mold I still am. I've got mold
I'm
on my
starting to be
houseplants right
obsessed
there.
with
No,
mold.
welcome. We can talk for hours about mold then. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, but so anyway, so today, so I know that this is OCD catastrophizing, so I'm able to step back and say, okay, we're gonna call a plumber and you're gonna stop. Like, shut the fuck up. Whereas before, if this was me
Are you
speaking,
calling the plumber, or are you going to live with a possibly moldy place?
no, I'm gonna call the plumber. There's a real smell there, but it's under the sink.
Oh yeah. You check once. All right.
I checked
I'm
once.
excited.
That's the thing. You can check once. Like every human checks once. But the problem is after then you're like, do I have mold? Should I like call another person? You know, all of that, that's OCD. And so 2 years ago I would have just laid in my bed for a week obsessing about whether all the walls have mold. And I don't do
Well,
that anymore.
that's very exciting. Maybe next time you're on, we can do a mold check-in. Um, it's very funny. Well, the thing is we're so hard on ourselves. We normally don't appreciate how far we've come, and that's why it's good to have friends going through this because I moved to Spain during the pandemic, and I'm often feeling very anxious. And then this is a step up doing this live
This is
public.
anxiety provoking.
Absolutely. And so, yes, it takes time and it's a skill. And the rules are pretty fixed. Once you get the foundations of treatment, it's just going back to the basics. And most people, it's hard, but if you stick with it and then you're easy on yourself when you relapse, like
That is
most
such a
of
key. I want to highlight that when you relapse, my God, do not get angry at yourself because you're just going to make yourself more upset and it actually causes you to relapse even harder.
Well, it's like falling downstairs and then kicking yourself when you're down, and then you fall down more stairs, and then you're
Yeah.
at the bottom of the stairs, and then you throw a pity party, as opposed to, as opposed to
Throw a
falling
little party
half.
at the bottom of the stairs.
It's like, oh, woe is me, and I'm a bad person. That's only a bad person to be at the bottom of the stairs. It's just like, and after moping around, so because if now. Well, you had a great post about how we feel the anxiety and then you just keep going, you know?
So that's really key. And I do that always because the thing is, I would often be like, am I doing this exposure right? Am I doing this right? What am I doing? And that was actually compulsions again. So it's important to say, okay, I'm going to do this response prevention, but then I'm going to make lunch and I'm going to do what I have to do today. And that automatically takes your brain off the obsession. There's a big difference between like thought blocking and just refocusing your attention onto something else.
Yeah, refocus is huge. And then it is exposure to just be doing scary things. This is a scary thing. I keep drinking water because my tongue keeps getting dry. Like my mouth keeps getting dry because that's a normal anxiety response. And I'm just used to it because I now live in Spain during the apocalypse of contamination. So it's like,
But
and then,
you make a really good point in the sense that all humans, in one way or other, do exposure and response prevention. Somebody who's afraid of flying but really wants to visit their daughter will get on that plane because their value is to see their daughter, right? It's just that we are scared of way
yeah.
more things than the average person. So that's why we have to actively engage in ERP.
Well, everyone gets scared, right? Like it's like catching a football and then running down the field. We just keep running. Like
Yeah.
we're just like other people would have dropped the ball. They're like, I don't like, it's like hot potato. They're like, ah. And then we hold down stronger. We're like, ow, it hurts. Like how much does it hurt? Like you're like, maybe I like it. Maybe I like it. And so
This
anyway,
podcast said that having OCD is like trying to hold a football as tightly as you can while simultaneously trying to drop it. And I thought that was perfect.
Whoa, that is really perfect. And then also being like only a bad person would have a football. It's also just trying to like
We
throw
guilt ourselves
morality.
all day long, and it's really, I don't know, I really don't like the emotion of guilt. And it's hard because you can't control how you feel. So the only way to get through guilt is actually just to accept that that's what you're feeling right now and
Well,
give
yeah,
it space.
acceptance of being, like having like challenges is probably the best way to go. Like, there's a bunch of things I wish I could have changed about the last month, but I did a great job. And yeah, sometimes you win some, you lose some. And I think you just try and stack as many wins per day. Like, okay, my thing is stack as many wins per day as I can and live healthy. Because if you start staying up late or not sleeping enough or drinking or eating unhealthy, it's like it's not it's not helpful. For me, I accepting the losses is very difficult because we have such high standards. So just being like, well, I lost money on that thing. I couldn't get around to it. Well, sometimes you lose. Like, would you agree? Is that your experience?
Oh yeah, as soon as I started treatment, I started loosening up a lot of standards on myself. Like you were saying before, if I'd lose $5, I would freak out. And now I basically have 10% of my budget that I've just allocated to loss because or else I'm just gonna
Ooh,
obsess about it, right?
that's really interesting. Like, I just budgeting for like I'm not sure how to call it exactly, but like failure, mistakes, like an
It's
investment in learning
really,
what doesn't
we need
work.
to have a metaphorical budget for mistakes. That's really good analogy though too, with money and just with life because
Well,
we're
like,
humans.
yeah, and then we have such a higher bar where most people would be like, like I dropped the ball. Well, we're like, oh, I can't believe I didn't get everything
Only an idiot would
perfect.
drop the ball. Like, that's
It's funny. Okay, well, I think that's wonderful. Is there anything else out of the major topics you wanted to address before we go?
no, I think we've covered everything. Basically, it's just maybe some guidance for this week. Try not to seek reassurance as much as possible, and record your wins. Have a little notebook or some pad on your computer, and try to record a couple wins every day. And stay
Absolutely.
motivated because ERP is really hard and it really sucks. And people don't realize when you're doing ERP that you're exhausted and they don't know why.
Yeah, it's what like our day to day is pretty intense, and appreciating that's a big deal. And so the key to recovery really is seeing what the core of the issue is, and then addressing it with treatment, which is, accepting uncertainty
Yeah.
and basically going towards the pain. Because we experience uncertainty as pain. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's so painful because we catastrophize, right? So every uncertainty is negative for
Yeah.
us. We're
So
never like
get
worrying about whether we're gonna win $1 million.
yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, that's a funny refocus. Anyway, refocusing is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Being really knowing what reassurance is and being really careful about it, and then accepting uncertainty, which
Yeah.
really
And
just
be kind
accepts.
to yourself as well.
Yeah. And that budget of like budgeting for mistakes, budgeting for learning or failure,
Yeah.
it's the same thing with kind of your emotions. Just like anticipate something crazy happening and then having to do two steps forward, one step back. Like two steps forward, one step back. It's massive progress and it's
Yeah, like the way
realistic.
we view, I actually don't like the word relapse because every single day is a better day than la yesterday because you're another day into treatment, right? So day one for me is like the day that I found out what ERP is. And every day, even if today I did compulsions all day long, I'm still better off than like 2 weeks ago when I was doing well, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I mean, it's true once people are here, like this is free from OCD, this is OCD Ottawa. Once people are here, they know that the game is OCD. treatment is the plan. And no football team just goes straight down the pitch. The game goes back and forth and back and
Recovery
forth.
is a roller coaster.
Yeah, like you score goals, you get goals scored against, and if you're at least playing and you're playing to win, yeah, then you can accept the losses. So, that's the key to recovery. Like, know the game, accept the uncertainty of it, understand the poison of reassurance, know that there's like a big group of people who have gotten better. It just takes time. It's difficult. We're a part of that, so we wanted to share because it's good for us, but it's also good for everyone else.
Yeah, my life has changed. I can undeniably say that treatment works because my life has done a 180.
Oh, that's so
So,
cool. Yeah, it's wonderful. And I've also done crazy things. Like I went to law school, became a lawyer, was like, you know what, this isn't for me. Moved to Spain. Now I'm a teacher, and like that's an enormous amount of uncertainty. Like suing big corporations and then moving to Spain, not being fluent really, and then doing a new career. So
yeah,
anyway,
and
I hope.
I changed careers too. I went into a field that I know almost nothing about, and I just bought a condo. So
Oh, that's
both
wild.
things stressful.
Your biggest nightmare happened. You bought the condo because I know you were worried about the condo, and then your biggest nightmare is like there might be mold. I just bought the condo, you know.
Yeah,
So this is absolutely the biggest,
it's a
and like you,
great exposure.
that's in my exposure as I moved to Spain, and then the worst thing possible could happen, like rules I couldn't understand, like curfews, lockdowns. You need paperwork to leave the town. I got like stopped by the police and had to
Oh
like.
my gosh.
Yeah, because I walked up a hill and I was out of breath, so I took my mask and I put it here to breathe, and then it was dark, there was no one around, and then police just drove up, like stopped beside me, and it was like, "Sabes que I reglas aquí," something like it wasn't that exactly, and I was like, "Whoa!" And then I was like, I said in Spanish, like I'm sorry, I know, because he had said, you have to wear your mask when there aren't police officers here, because I saw him like this. And I didn't get like arrested or deported or anything. Like so it's you know, and I didn't spend a ton of time, like waste a ton of time worrying about it. Did you waste the? I imagine you ruminated about buying your apartment. Did you?
Actually, surprisingly, I didn't really. I just
Whoa,
found
look.
the apartment that I wanted and I fell in love with it and I didn't question it. So.
So yeah, you can see a ton. You can save a ton of time if
Well,
you
because I
really do treatment.
knew I went in knowing that there will always be a better condo. There will always be one. Just as
That's
in a
next
relationship.
level.
Yeah, well,
That's
in a
next
relationship,
level.
there's always going to be a better person suited for you out there. But at
We
some
should do.
point in life, you have to
We
make a
should do a
decision.
relationship OCD one because like that's next level for me. I haven't gotten there. Like the idea of like there's another partner, there's a better partner. My partner might be cheating. In fact, he is. Like that's next level even for me. But I didn't think there'd be like another apartment, a better apartment, another mate, a better mate.
But
I
isn't that
never.
always why we have difficulty making choices? Because we always know, and it's true. Like it's just that we're so we know what the risks are so well, and we focus on them.
I mean, you're right, because that's true. I just never had that thought. That's the reason that powers everything. Like, you're right. If you don't buy something, it's because you're worried about like something better coming along and that being a mistake. I'm now obsessing about which phone to buy, and I'm doing like an obsessive amount of research. And it's like, you're right. It's because a better deal might come around.
And it will, probably. But you're walking around without a good phone right now, so that's another risk, right?
Yeah, that's hysterical. Okay, well,
Yeah.
you blew my mind, Margot. Um, all right, well, thanks for if you watched this far, thank you very much. Definitely find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and follow us there. Oh, we've also got a new team member on Twitter. If you liked Matt from the last week, Matt is now tweeting for us,
Yeah, and I've
and
been posting some of his tweets on
yeah,
Instagram as well.
you might have seen them on Instagram, reposted by Margot. And Matt, we're hoping Matt will come on with an exciting story for next time. Uh, Stay tuned. Thanks, Margot.
Bye.
Goodbye.